Step into the mystical realm with Paranormal M. Our stories will make you question the boundaries of possibility. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to experience the latest mind-altering tales. Ask Reddit. Once when I was about 9 years old, it was late at night. I'm asleep in my room, and my younger sister, who's 8, is asleep down the hall in her room. It's not uncommon for us to run into each other's rooms if we have a nightmare. You know that whole trying to outrun the demons, just run into the other's bed? Well, this night, I literally woke up out of a dead sleep. It's dark, the moon is high outside my window, and my sister is standing in my doorway. It's not debatable that it's her. Her height, her stupid haircut, down to the New Kids on the Block oversized t-shirt nightgown from my mom's youth. But she's just standing there, one hand on the doorknob, other hand on the doorframe, staring at me, silent. I look at her for a minute, and then just kind of annoyed, I throw my blanket open. "Come on, if you're coming in here." She doesn't move, doesn't say anything. She's still staring. And I'm not even creeped out at this point. I'm just annoyed and sleepy and white trash. So I get up to go hit her. I know, it's a garbage pail kid kind of thing to do, but I'm just being honest. Our parents didn't teach us self-regulation. It is what it is. I'm better now. I jump out and stomp over to where she is and stop at arm's length in front of her. She's still silent, still staring. Now, I'm a little bit creeped out at this point. "What are you doing?" And I swipe at her overhand. She disappears as my hand falls. Not like dissipates into nothing, like straight up is just gone. I look back at my bed. I look in the hallway. Nothing. So now I run to her room down the hall because it's that time. Nightmare time. Zoom, jump, wrestle into her covers. And when I get there, I notice that she's there, thank God. But she's shaking violently. She's having a fucking seizure. So then I go into a full tilt alarm, run to my parents' room, turn on all the lights, yelling that my sister's having a seizure. We go to the emergency room, and she gets her diagnosis of childhood epilepsy. I also didn't even know what a seizure was when I started yelling about this, which was also weird. I honestly think to this day that she astral projected or something. That bitch found a way to come get me because she was in trouble in her bed. Ask Reddit 2. My mom is usually away from home quite often, and when I was younger, like 10 or 15 years old, she would make me stay over at my grand's house. My grand's house is extremely old, 300 years old in fact, and the interior is very old-fashioned. Entering it always gave me a sinister feel. It wasn't just me being scared of the dark or anything, because I'd still have this fear even during the day. The house is quite large, well, huge in my opinion, and with quite a lot of land attached. My gran has had her heating system redone many times, as the house for some reason never ever even heats up. She eventually gave up and uses a gas fire thing. There's no Wi-Fi in the house, only in the kitchen, which my granddad built as an extension when they moved there. The kitchen is the only place in the house that feels safe. The rest of the house, the walls are too thick for Wi-Fi to reach, which is why it's only in the kitchen. I think anyway, but this means I don't have access to the internet. My phone is pretty much useless in the rest of the house, because there's also no reception. Anyway, I'd stay there usually every weekend and sometimes during the weekdays. I had my own large room, too. I am an active sleeper, meaning I often sleep talk, but I very rarely sleep walked, until I started sleeping there. I'd often find myself waking up downstairs in my grandfather's chair, or in the fancy sitting room in the back of the house at like 1 to 4 a.m. I had no recollection of going there, so obviously I sleepwalked, but I didn't even remember falling asleep. I always had a tough time sleeping in my grand's, as I just have a fight or flight instinct constantly stopping me from sleeping. But then I'd wake up in a different room with no memory of where I had slept or anything. The scary thing is, there are no street lamps nearby, so the house would be pitch black, and it would be so cold that my phone would die from the cold. So I'd usually have no light source, and I'd wander back upstairs stumbling in the dark. When trying to fall asleep, I'd always hear strange sounds, and it wasn't just me. My mom used to when she slept here. Her friend, my aunt, my cousins, everyone heard these sounds, and they had weird experiences. The wallpaper would move as if animated, and it would be like someone was walking outside my door in the hallway. And then turning on the tap in the bathroom and creaking open the doors. My gran always had them shut at night, not sure why. Quite often, though, I'd stare at my door and suddenly it would be pushed open. Not enough for me to see the other side, but just the tiniest crack open. I stopped closing my door after a while because I fucking hated it. Things escalated, however. I'd get so scared. I'd close my eyes and I'd pretend I was dead or asleep. I couldn't even breathe due to the fear of being noticed by whatever was walking around. But whatever it was, it started coming into my room. And it was like as if I was noticed by whatever was walking around, but I don't know, it was just getting braver and trying to approach me, or maybe toying with me. Anyway, I'd have my eyes tight shut, and I'd be as still as a corpse. And suddenly I'd feel extreme pressure and weight on my upper legs and chest, as if a full-grown human had sat on them. This happened quite often, and the freaky thing is, my mom told me that she also experienced this when young. It would also feel like something was breathing on my face and touching my hand. It was extremely creepy. Not just in a paranormal sense, but as a young girl it felt really weird and uncomfortable, as if this thing had very wrong intentions, if you know what I mean. Anyway, this went on for ages. It would either lay on me or just sit on me, and I'd still be sleepwalking or waking up in those 2 rooms. One night, however, I was done. I didn't want to deal with this crap anymore, and my boyfriend had suggested to me that there might actually be someone living in the walls, and I wanted to get the cops involved or literally anyone to help as I was genuinely terrified. So I started being at the ready with my camera. I had a battery pack for my phone, and I'd just have it on charge constantly as my phone battery would jump from 70 to 20 to 50 to 5%. Constantly in that house due to the cold, I guess. I think this made that thing mad, as it started being more active and more loud after that. At one point, it even pushed my wardrobe, which wobbled a lot, and it was terrifying. I started seeing weird shadows on the ceiling, as if something was moving on it at high speeds, and I'd constantly be taking pictures everywhere, but with no luck, until one day, that is. I took a picture of my ceiling, and in the corner of the picture, there was a weird white thing, like a foot or a limb or something. It had no details like toes or nails that I could see. It was just a pale white, and slightly blurred, as if it was moving at high speeds to avoid the camera. I showed my mom, I showed my boyfriend, I showed quite a few people. My mom started to let me sleep alone at home because of this. My boyfriend was scared shitless. I only stayed a few nights there after that, and barely anything happened to them. Only the noises from the corridor and the bathroom, but no interactions with me or my room. Then that was it. Never slept there again. About a year after that, my grandfather passed away in the house. The fancy sitting room at the back of the house was turned into a room for him, as we didn't want him spending his last days in the hospital. He had a motor neuron disease. Something to note about him: he was very strict with how many lights we had on in the house at one time. He'd get angered if too many lights were on, and he was kind of crazy about saving energy and money. Anyway, when he passed away, he had nearly all of the lights on in the house as the whole family was there. But when he passed, all the lights turned off. It was only my grand's house that had this power cut too. The nurses and doctors were so stunned that they left instantly and left the body in the house. After his passing, the sinister feeling I had in the house had gone. Well, not entirely, but it was definitely dulled down. I haven't slept there since, so I don't know if this sound still happens. My gran is usually fast asleep and has medication that helps her sleep deeply, so she wouldn't know either, but yeah, that's my experience. I've experienced a few odd paranormal things in my life, but my gran's house was by far the most terrifying and extreme. I'm not religious at all, but honestly, what I experienced in my gran's made me pray to God out of fear. Ask Reddit 3. For purposes of this post, I'll call this first location the first location. I was at a paranormal investigation, sat up in an old house. I believe they mean set up in an old house. Won't give the name because it'll give my location away. You don't want that. There was 5 of us sitting in the addition on the first floor where the last owner took her last breath. We were listening to the history when from above we heard it. Footsteps, walking back and forth. The light swinging overhead with a force. All 5 of us were in this room, and nobody else was in the home. It was bizarre. We decided to head upstairs, but left a bell on the bed. And we were hoping that this ghost wanted us. If she did anyway, she can just simply ring the bell. As we headed up the very narrow and steep stairs to the second story, what did we hear? The bell. We stood there in all the stairway, trying to decide either to search upstairs for footprints or go back to the room that we left the bell in. We didn't want to split up, because then any footsteps above or below would have to be discounted, as it could easily be us. We decided to check the bell, go up. There was other things that happened in that house. Some people claimed to have been touched or felt hands on them. We would hear scratches or whispers and footprints above us, if on the first floor, or below us, if on the second floor, and this was only sometimes. On the second floor, I did do an investigation by myself while everybody else was outside. I wanted pictures, but nothing happened. I went back here 2 times and got some EVPs, but the bell was the craziest thing from that location. The second location will be called the theater. This was the last investigation I had with this paranormal group before the tragedy happened. Car accident not related to anything paranormal. We lost 50% of the group in this. This theater still haunts my dreams. Something yanked on my necklace, and the boiler almost blew up. My voice recorder suddenly went off without me touching it, not once but 3 times. The last time without batteries in it. I got separated from the others in the basement tunnels and found myself facing a shadow of a person standing before me. Could have been reflections. When leaving, I suddenly felt very ill and had to pull over to throw up as I left the city. I got suddenly blurry. There was an overall sense of dread. Like, if I didn't get out, something was going to happen. And back at home, my neck had scratches from where my necklace was pulled and my arms were bruised. I think spirits can feast on vulnerability. And during the theater investigation, I was very vulnerable due to the encounter with a man as I was walking from my car to the theater. So I think that I think that shook me so much. I opened myself to paranormal, and the paranormal loves to fuck with weak individuals. So it chose me to mess with. At the first location, I wasn't stressed at all, and I was able to keep my mental health strong. Therefore, the paranormal chose to focus on those who had open and vulnerable minds. I still try to go on as many paranormal investigations that I can get my hands onto. I managed to be part of a non-taped investigation with the ghost hunters in Kentucky. Went on ghost tours in London and Hawaii and Poland. I plan on visiting Waverly Hills and other haunted hotspots. But I'll never ever go back to that theater, even for $1 million. I experienced what it had to offer, and feel satisfied that there is no further business I have with that place. However, with the first location, I feel we have become good acquaintances, and I can't wait for my next visit. I feel like I haven't experienced anything that place had to offer, so until I do, I don't mind dropping in and saying hi. Ask Reddit 4. These are the most memorable. One house I lived in was when I was a teenager. We had stuff go flying off a wall shelf unit. Helium balloons that we had all over from a party would somehow teleport around the house, despite having no path of getting ahead of you. It would be in one room, then on the second floor it'd be in the laundry room in the basement, bobbing up and down like it was being tugged on. I was alone there one night. I decided to go out. Locked the house up, and the parents were over at a boat about an hour's drive away. I came home to the dining room chairs stacked up along with other kitchen items in a magnificent way. It was all leaning up against a ceiling fan. I would routinely see the light in the hallway just turn on, and just feet and shadows under my closed door walking back and forth at night, despite hearing both my parents snoring in their room. The worst one was, one night I had a couple of friends over, and I lived in the basement apartment of this house at this time. We heard the doorknob to the outside start jiggling. Not expecting anyone, I just went over, flung the door open to find no one there. This doorknob jiggling kept happening, and all of us being too freaked out really to ignore it. After a while, there was pounding in all the walls around us, just going in a circle around us. My friends decided to leave. I was left alone for the rest of the night, hearing footsteps walking up and down the stairs to the basement apartment. Later on, we just had a tenant take up that basement. He would say that he would routinely see an old lady just standing and staring at him down there. Ghost Cat Messenger. A About 12 years ago, I had been to visit my grandfather, who had been in the hospital for quite a few weeks and didn't seem to be getting much better. I was sitting up on my roof thinking about him. After I had come back, as I was just having this nagging feeling that it would be the last time that I saw him. I was trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was probably going to lose him soon. I see this chubby ginger cat just standing there watching me with this intense look in its eyes. The cat looked a lot like one of the cats that we had fostered back when I was a kid, which we had originally named Ginger as well. Somewhat distracted, still thinking about my grandfather and knowing full well that it couldn't be my childhood cat, I don't know why I just called out to it going, "Hi, Ginger," and it just stared at me. I started feeling a little bit unsettled as it literally went towards what the grandfather's bedroom was and just squatted on the top of his roof, still glaring at me, but not really engaging with me in any way aside from that. Creeped me out a bit, so I just decided to go downstairs as it was soon going to become dark anyway. That night, I dreamt that I was walking along the balcony where I had been earlier that evening with my mother, and she says, "I have something I need to tell you. Ginger passed away." And I seemed to have quite a strong emotional reaction to that news in my sleep and woke up, tears in my eyes, and ran to my parents' room to tell them what I had dreamt. As I get to their room, I see that their lights are on, and my father's on the phone with the hospital. Apparently, they had rang us to tell us that my grandfather had indeed passed away just minutes before, and my mom was sitting next to my father in bed crying. I just shared a look with my parents, who nodded. No words were exchanged, and I just knew that he was gone. I couldn't stop thinking about the cat that night before, and the way that it was sitting on my grandfather's roof just glaring at me, and how in my dream my mother told me that it was the cat that passed away and not my grandfather. But overall, I chalked it up to just a weird coincidence and moved on with life. Fast forward a few months. I am again sitting on the roof. Yep, it was my go-to place to think and unwind. Anyway, I see the cat again, this time walking around on my elderly neighbor's roof, again glaring at me while doing so, and I remember thinking to myself in passing, "Oh God, it's the cat. I hope everything's okay with them." As I remembered the last time I'd seen it, right? But I didn't think too much of it, and I just went back to thinking about why some boy I liked in high school didn't like me back or something silly like that. Anyway, next day I find out that our elderly neighbor had passed away in hospital, and the time of death would have been roughly right around the same time as it had seen the cat hovering over their roof. This gave me the chills, but I still didn't really want to think that this cat was some weird omen and just brushed it off as a coincidence again. Again, fast forward a year or so, and third time I see this cat. I'm walking along with my other neighbor's roof, and it's just glaring at me, and I distinctly remember looking at the cat and saying aloud, "What the fuck, Ginger? Who's gonna fucking well die now?" And sure enough, the next day I find out that my neighbor, who I was good friends with, and still am, her cousin who was born with MS had passed away the evening before. Not in that house or anywhere close, though, but would have been the same time again as I saw the cat. This time I was quite exasperated and just way too many coincidences, and I got really creeped out. I started always looking out for the damn cat every time I would go up there, which was pretty much every evening, but would never see it except for these instances. Fourth and final time, which I think was probably the scariest of them all. A few months after the last incident, I was up on the roof with another friend of mine. I wasn't extremely close to this girl, but we had a group of friends over and the others had gone to pick up some food for all of us. So it was just me and let's call her Haley for this story. And we were all talking about friends of ours who we have in common and just making small talk. Really, as there really wasn't much to really talk about because we weren't all that close. She was telling me about how she heard from one of her exes and how it was so out of the blue that we were laughing at how weird it was when suddenly I see the fucking cat again. This time, walking right next to us. Again, glaring at me. This time it even sort of hissed at us. I almost crapped myself and Haley noticed I looked horrified. She was like, "What's wrong with you? Are you scared of cats?" So I told her about how every time I see this damn cat, somebody dies. She looked quite creeped out, so I went, "Sorry." Continue, I'm probably just being paranoid. You were telling me about, let's call her ex, Martin. So she continued telling me about what she said to Martin when he contacted her, etc., etc., etc. And we moved on and our friends got back and we all had a great night. Sure enough, the next day Haley called me up, bawling her eyes out, telling me that she had just found out that Martin had died in a terrible car crash the evening before. Right around when we had been talking about him and seen the fucking cat. And she was freaking out and crying and she was like, "It's all that fucking cat's fault. You need to kill that cat." Martin had been in a different city than us at that time, and the only thing that stood out was that we had been talking about him when the cat appeared to us. I didn't go back on that roof for a good couple of months after that. Although I was pretty fucking shaken up about it, and understandably, Haley literally never came to my house ever again. Got up the courage a few months after to again start going up there. That was when I got over it. But thankfully, I never saw that cat again and haven't since. A year or so after that, I moved to Australia and barely go back home since then. But even now, when I still do, I go back on that roof, and whenever I do, I always think about the cat, and it still gives me goosebumps. I still think about it often and honestly wonder what it was. Was it like a ghost or a reaper or just a series of crazy coincidences? I don't know. Astral projection. Hey guys, so this just happened to me today. I have a friend who comes over all the time, sometimes even rocks up to my house unannounced, and my dog is obsessed with him. She has a special way of greeting him and everything. He has a few stories of strange, uncanny stuff happening to him. And this was all in this day in his life, and we would often just joke that he's like a wizard or a warlock, but it's always just been jokes. Today, however, something happened that neither of us can really explain, and we've been trying to figure out how to justify it since. We were chatting as we normally do over social media, and we're talking about ghost stories from his culture, and he was telling me about some supernatural beings to do with the very common topic that we're both interested in, the supernatural. And I left my phone to take a quick break. And while waiting for him to respond to a message to install my new clothes dryer, had to move the old one first, so it was a process of doing that. Didn't have anything in my mind at all except getting the dryer stuff sorted. Wasn't even actively thinking about our conversation, really, as it's a very common topic for us to talk about. Next thing I know, while I'm struggling with moving the old clothes dryer, I see my dog eagerly running to the door, doing her special little greeting the way that she only does for him. Couldn't have been more than 3 minutes since his last message, and he lives at least 10 to 12 minutes away, which was a bit strange, but I just figured maybe he was trying to fuck with me and decided to rock up unannounced. So I looked to the door, which was one of those foggy windows, and I see him peering in, the way he always does when he comes over. Like I've seen the image like 1,000,000 times, and I know it's him. Same face, same build, same hair. Wearing like a blue t-shirt or something. There was no knock, however, but the dog was already there doing her thing, as she always did for him only. Eager for me to get to the door to open to let him in, and I saw what appeared to be him, and rolled my eyes, went to the door to let him in. Opened the door and there's no one there, but I was greeted by a weird whoosh of wind. Awkward. Still thought he's just messing around and maybe parked down the road a bit rather than in my driveway as normal, and I just hid when I opened the door. Or maybe he just hid when I opened the door, but my dog is fucking confused as hell, starts whimpering and sniffing the door and then looking at me. Then checking the door again, what just happened? I'm also confused because it isn't like him to just hide and then not come out. I'm like, what the fuck? And I just shut the door. I was definitely a tad creeped out at this point. So I went straight to my phone and I sent him a message telling him what happened. And as it turned out, around the exact same time this happened, he had randomly dozed off for a few minutes. And he was actually wearing a blue shirt, but a blue blanket on, and he sent me a picture of himself at home and the blue blanket. What the fuck? Who was at my door in blue then, looking exactly like him and peering in exactly like he does, and my dog sensed him? What did I actually see? Note: my dog is very perceptive. Had it been anyone else, she wouldn't have been barking like crazy and trying to eat them, probably. Also, she was unsettled for about 4 hours after this incident, hyper-vigilant, clingy, and staring at the door and whimpering, which is very unlike her. Anyway, the whole thing creeped me the hell out. As we were trying to make sense of it, he also confirmed that he was actually thinking about my place right before he dozed off, because we're waiting on some new furniture to arrive tomorrow, and he was just randomly thinking about how it would look once it arrives and all that. So the best we could come up with was some accidental astral projection or something. Sounds cooked, I know, but this is exactly what happened, and I'm shook. My haunted hallway experience. Not safe for work. You've been warned. During either my junior or senior year of high school, my dad moved into a new house after a divorce from my ex-stepmom. I had 2 younger siblings, between the 2 of them a younger brother and a younger sister. Since I lived with my mom a majority of the time during high school and stayed on campus during my first college semester, I shared a room in this house with my Anna, my younger sister, who is about 9 years younger than me. Alex, my younger brother by 6 years, had his own room down along the hall. This incident takes place in the upstairs hallway. For context, the hallway comes off from the kitchen. Going down it, you'll pass us kids' bathroom on the left, with Alex's bedroom door across from it on the right. Continuing down, the hallway ends in a small square, with the entrance to Anna and I's room and Dad's room sitting catty-corner to each other. Hope that's not too confusing. One night the summer before I started college, I was coming home late, and I was on a date with my, at the time, boyfriend. It was about 2 a.m., so everyone in the house was asleep. Coming in the house, I knew my dad was dead asleep because I could hear his snoring. I went upstairs and walked to my room. Alex and Dad's door were shut, meaning that they were both asleep. Anna was asleep in our room, and I threw my phone onto the bed and went to the bathroom to get ready for bed. I shut the bathroom door and started getting dressed for bed and brushing my teeth. As I was finishing up and brushing my hair, I heard a noise from outside of the bathroom door, in the hallway. This didn't really surprise me, since Alex usually got up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. I went to open the door to tell him that I would only be just a second. But before I turned the handle, I stopped. The first noise I heard had been the creaking of the wood flooring in the hallway. But now I heard a different noise. It was breathing. Now that doesn't seem scary in itself, but it wasn't normal breathing. It was a heavy, not labored or anything, just heavy. I don't know how to explain it, but there's a difference between the sound of kids breathing and adults breathing when you hear it in the dead silence. But the breathing definitely sounded like an adult. I could still hear my dad snoring, so I knew it wasn't him. It couldn't be Alex. That's why I stopped in the first place. That and the footsteps moved to the kitchen, and they too sounded heavy, like a grown man walking around heavy. This was when I started panicking. My first thought was, well, an intruder. There was a sliding back door in the kitchen that led to the backyard, and our fence was by no means unclimbable. I worried that one of the kids must have left it unlocked when they had went to the park behind the house and no one noticed. I knew for sure that I locked the front door when I had come in, but since I didn't use it, I hadn't checked the back door. Since it all made sense in my mind, I started panicking even more. I locked the door and held my breath, and I could hear the breathing start to come down the hallway. The creaking of the floorboards signaled how close it was to the bathroom door. I held my breath, frozen in absolute fear. The breathing was heavy and crystal clear, like a man was standing directly on the other side of the door. I was shaking with fear. My dad always locked his door at night, so he couldn't help my siblings. I didn't have my phone on me, and I was in my room on my bed. I didn't have any sort of weapon in the bathroom. I hadn't heard any more movement from outside the door, and that breathing was still there. I slowly and quietly knelt down so I could look underneath the door. I was looking for feet. I was so scared I could hear my heart beating in my ears. There was nothing, no feet, and suddenly no breathing. The creaking was gone too. I got up, still trying to be quiet, and grabbed my hairbrush. I figured that was the best thing I'd have for a weapon, and I was just going to have to make a mad dash to my phone on my bed. I held the hairbrush and quietly unlocked the door, then held my breath and listened. Nothing. I whipped the door open and looked up and down the hallway. Nothing. I ran to my room and grabbed my phone and called my boyfriend, that I was just on a date with hours prior. I even asked him if he could come inside after he dropped me off. I was so sure that there had been someone in this house. With him on the phone, I went through and checked the whole house. There was nothing. I checked the back door in the kitchen, and it had been locked. Alex and Anna were sleeping peacefully, and I could tell by Dad snoring he hadn't woken up either. I went to bed that night with my door locked. The next morning, I told my dad everything that had happened. He could tell that I was genuinely scared, so he checked everywhere too. Apparently, we had an alarm system, and it hadn't gone off that night. It wasn't an intruder, or at least not a person, but it was so real and so terrifying that I didn't go visit my dad for a while after that. And it was the first few months before I spent a night at that house again. Ghosts of Carmel, Maine. I found Kent's channel because I wanted to find real content capturing the paranormal side of the world. I found myself amazed at what Kent was able to capture, showing the viewer's end, and just dove in watching his videos for just being amazed. I soon caught up with his videos until recently. I remembered his channel and went to it, and I ended up watching a video called Portals into the House of Hell. At first, it was the same normal video I remember watching, until it got to a certain part of the video. Stamp 4913. This raised an eyebrow. It 100% looks fake and reminds me of those fake ghost apps where you can make one appear. So I did some research on the photo capture, I couldn't find a 100% match on it. Some similar, but nothing as body-shaped as shown in the video. Moving on around stamp 5646. Kent expresses that he found or saw a book on his table. A book with 6-digit fingers. A number 3 really got my attention. I opened the book and what I saw shocked me. While maybe Kent just didn't know where this book is from or the video is fake in that moment, the book, as some of you will see, is from the children's TV show Gravity Falls. Kent goes on about how the inside of the book shocked him. While it was truly like any other children's ghost and spell book that you would find at a book fair or online. Following up, Kent then showed a picture of some evidence that he had found a while back. A knife and 2 runes. I was curious on the runes and ended up doing a lot of research on them and their meaning, and to see if it had just maybe been a picture from somewhere. While I did not find the exact image online, I did find similar runes online for sale. Some wood, some stone, and some differently shaped, but none exactly like in his picture. What I found out about the rune symbol: in runes, X, the meaning, gift, gebo, gratitude, exchange, receive, or sacrifice. Out of all of the research I've done, I couldn't find the second rune that he showed us. It was a mixture of X with another rune, meaning freeze or frozen. My guess is that either that rune is 100% fake, or just so out there that I couldn't find it. Unless it was also an X, which was marked down in the center, which would mean freeze it, which would explain a series of bad luck on him and his family if it's real, maybe. I also want to point out that in the picture, at a quick glance, the black lines showing the symbol seemed like a thick carving or paint. While if you look closer, it actually looks like he or somebody else took a photo and they drew the lines. So either he got them mistaken because of them being old, or they're fake. Moving on. Kent also shared some photos of his family and things that he had that were happening to them. I also searched for those photos one by one. I did this not to be insensitive, but for research. For starters, let's go with the cuts and scratches on the legs and arms from the cat. That very well could be true, or they could also be from playing or falling somewhere. It's very easy to fake. I did, however, not find any matches online. Same for all the photos that he shared. Therefore, they very well could be 100% his photos that he's using, or special effects maybe. I'm not sure, nor am I claiming he is. Moving on to the shadow people. I would like to have a conversation about the multiple shadow people Kent has captured. They are freaky, don't get me wrong, but the question is, are they real? From my own personal eyes and seeing these sort of things, I'd like to say both yes and no. Shadow people are very rare, especially rare to capture, let alone see. And when you might see one, they aren't what you think. They generally appear as a mist, a very dark blob, maybe a line. I'm not claiming that they can't form as a humanoid shape, but I've yet to see one like that. I have, however, seen a full body form before. A detailed older woman, clothed and all. Nothing I've seen from Kent's videos have been similar at all, as they're generally shown as shadows exclusively. I want to move on to voices from the videos, but I don't personally remember too much about each video to have a full talk. This will be the end for now. Something was haunting me when I was a kid. There was a time of my childhood where a lot of strange things happened to me. During that time, I used to have nightmares every night. Some of them were so disturbing that I woke up sweating and with my heart racing. One night when I was sleeping, I woke up because I felt a hand tickling on my neck. The hand was cold and it tickled my neck very quickly and hard. So when I woke up, I still had the sensation in my neck skin. I thought that maybe it was just a dream, and I went back to sleep. It didn't go away. The tickling started happening every night, and during the day I would ask my family if it was them pranking me. But none of them took me seriously, so it definitely wasn't them. A couple of days passed, and one night I realized I'd left my jacket at my neighbor's house, which was across a little park in front of my house. It was dark outside, but I didn't feel scared to go because it was only 5 minutes away, so I decided to go as quick as possible. Everything was going all right until I started crossing the park. Suddenly, I felt uneasy. This place was extremely quiet and lonely. I felt like something dangerous was watching me, and that's when it happened. I heard a deep, long moan come from between the bushes. Something that sounded like a zombie. I turned around and looked into the bushes. I will never forget what I saw. It was a tall, completely red man. He looked like he was covered in bright red blood. I started screaming and ran to my neighbor's house. They let me in and gave me a glass of water to calm me down. My heart was about to come out through my throat. I was shaking so hard that it took me a while to calm down, and I was telling them what happened. After that, they took me home. I told my family what happened, and they told me I just imagined it. I couldn't cross that park anymore from the fear. It felt like it was just too much from seeing that. I had to cross it a few times after that happened, and I heard the noise again. Just heard the noise. I never saw the man again. But no one seemed to hear it, just me. Luckily, one day it just stopped happening, as well as the tickling and the nightmares. I still don't know if it was my imagination or not, but it felt pretty real to me. Too weird to explain. For context, I do home services for work. I drive a shuttle bus that's been revamped on the inside so I can do my job. While I'm working, I usually listen to podcasts or music. However, I only use one earbud at a time in case the homeowner comes knocking on my vehicle. Maybe they need something. Yesterday, I get to my last house of the day. I make contact with the homeowner and I get into my vehicle to do my job. I get an earbud in and realize I need something, and I have to exit the vehicle. I take the earbud out and I place it on my workstation. Being that I just arrived at this home, my workstation is cleaned off and void of anything but my lone earbud. Doing what needed to be done, I get back into my vehicle, grab my earbud, and grab all my tools. Upon turning back, I see something small and white on my station. I pick it up and it's a cushion attachment to my earbud. I immediately thought how weird it was that I didn't realize it was missing. Have you ever used an earbud without one of these? Very uncomfortable. I pull my earbud out of my ear and see that it isn't missing this cushion piece. This is why this is unexplainably weird. The second cushion attachment, not even sure if that's what it's called, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It went missing months ago. I'm talking 4 to 6 months ago. Each of my earbuds had its own cushion attachment, as they're supposed to. One day while I'm working, one goes missing. I looked everywhere for that piece. After a couple of weeks, not finding it, I just accepted it as lost forever and would transfer the sole cushion attachment that it had from that earbud to the other one, as needed. I was super weirded out, kinda got the heebie-jeebies, and called my husband to tell how this piece to my earbud magically appeared on my workstation. He's a bit of a skeptic, so he said that maybe it was just stuck somewhere and got dislodged and fell onto my table. I said, "Fell from the roof of my vehicle?" I can't even imagine how his explanation could even be possible. Was an atheist before this. I'm a 49-year-old male. By the time I had reached my early 20s, I was of the opinion that there was nothing to life but what you could see or touch and nothing else. If you're reading this, then you know that there's basically no longer the case for this. I guess the best way to start would be to tell you about a friend that I had in high school. His name was Todd. I had met him through another guy that I had known since 6th grade. Todd was just a really good guy, always upbeat, loyal, just a solid person. Looking back on it, it's probably the most genuine human being I'd ever met, including all the way up until now. We were around the same age, and when I was around 19, it had been a while since I had seen him, and our mutual friend calls me and tells me Todd's house had caught on fire and he had died trying to save his younger siblings during the fire. I can't remember exactly, but I know he made several trips in the house saving at least 2 of his siblings, and went in again and the roof collapsed on him, and another one just 5 feet from the door, killing them both. Just a horrible thing. Couldn't believe it. It was the first person other than the elderly family member that I knew who passed. Fast forward 4 to 5 years, and I'm in my car heading to a friend's house. They lived in the same neighborhood where all this happened. I may be a mile or so away from where I'm headed, and about 100 yards or a little more ahead of me, walking towards me, there's a guy in jeans and a dark goody hands in the goody pocket, and his head down, like looked at the ground as he was walking. For one, this is how I remember Todd. Seems like I always remember him wearing jeans and a hoodie, and maybe a jean jacket. Narrator correction, it was not goody, even though it says goody, it was hoodie. Much more sense. Seems like I always remembered him wearing jeans and a hoodie, and maybe a jean jacket. What really caught my eye was his gait. I think Todd had one leg a little bit longer than the other one, or something that he just maybe had sort of a limp. He could have picked him out of a crowd just by his walk. It was that unique. So as we're getting closer to each other, I just feel something is not right, or just off. I can't really put my finger on it, but as I get to him, I slow down and stop right next to him, and he stops as well. As we both come to a stop, he raises his head and looks right at me. We were just about 10 feet apart. One lane of the 2-lane road anyway. When he looks at me, it's him, and his face is glowing the most brilliant green you could imagine. We look at each other for maybe 4 to 5 seconds, it seems like, and he had this calm, peaceful look on his face. I think I was in shock, I guess, I don't know, but I let my foot off the brake and coasted probably 30 or 40 feet down the road and stopped again. But I was too scared. I guess that's the word looking back, so I sat there for a few seconds and just pulled off and went to where I was going. I hear people sort of talking the colors in heaven being so much brighter or just more beautiful than colors here. And while explaining rides, I just think I get it. I think that's where this green was from. About a week before this happened, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine. I explained to him that I was an atheist. True believer, Todd was on that road that day to let me know that there was something else, more to life than what we normally see. It changed my whole outlook on life in a split second. Ask Reddit. Portland, Oregon, 1994. In the area of southeast Portland, just a hair south of Flavel Street, Flavel, and 52nd, was an old historic mansion. It had that semi-Addams Family vibe to it. This place was haunted as fuck. The stories are already long, and each one could be on its own tale, so I'll bullet point below. If you'd like more details, ask in a reply. 1. We first heard the sounds of dogs barking, yipping, and whining in the basement the day my friends moved in there. They didn't own a dog. 2. Lights would constantly turn on behind you or off when you walked into a room. Faucets turned on by themselves. Random objects in locked rooms wouldn't be where they were left. 3. Many times my friend's family and I swear we heard a grandfather clock chime 13 times at 6:30 in the morning. 4. Many of us felt what could be described as a gentle touch, like a family member placing their hand on our shoulders. It had weight and pressure. We'd turn and nobody was there. This was made even worse when one of us had our back to the wall. 5. My friend, his older brother, and I witnessed what we'd later believed to be a ghost of the original owner. An old man ascended the staircase beside me when I went downstairs to use the bathroom. There were no elderly men in the house. 6. Many times when driving up the long driveway, a dark figure could be observed watching people driving up to the house in a third-story window on the north side. Almost every time this happened, nobody was home. 7. The eldest daughter complained constantly. She'd at random times in her room hear the sound of someone behind her, sniffing her hair. She'd turn, and she'd be alone in the room. Furthermore, she'd constantly had her door locked due to her brothers constantly bugging her. 8. Twice while watching movies in the living room, we all heard the loud and heavy noise of something moving across the wooden floor on the second floor. Somehow a near 200-pound wooden bed and frame had moved almost 9 feet across the room without disturbing the contents of the bed. 9. In my opinion, the second scariest thing happened one night while playing Dungeons & Dragons in the living room. At one point, Clarissa, the second oldest daughter of my friend's family, got up to do a little mild bit of body acting for a scene. She moved to the bay window and placed her hands on the little seat there. Her character was building up to some sort of loud outburst. She screams to the effect of, "Lord Cavington, I've had enough of you." Without warning, 3 very loud, very sharp bangs came from the window, as if someone was beating their fist on the other side. Seeing as it was still light out, we could see nobody was there. This was followed by a voice screaming from the 3rd floor, "Keep quiet, you rotten girl!" That made us all nope the hell out of that night. 10. Finally, there was the door to hell. In that 3rd-story suite, we discovered there was a hidden door in the wall. It was a hideaway closet. Behind that door was a second and smaller door. The moment we all discovered it, we were overcome with this utterly massive sensation of dread. We opened it. Inside was a smallish crawl space. The inner walls of the space were covered in claw-like marks as if made by human fingernails. There were darker stains in the wood when we washed it. And we tried to get a better look, really. On the inside of the door number 2 were weakly carved words that read, "This is the door to hell." To this day, I and anybody else that day constantly have this door appear in our dreams. It appears randomly. Like, imagine you're walking into a classroom of your high school. You open the door to your dream, but instead of your classroom, it's the 3rd-story suite with the door to hell open. Each time you see it, you're progressively closer to the last. A feeling of predatory desire washes over you, like you're the prey. Ask Reddit. Lived in my grandparents' old farmhouse for a few years with my family after my grandmother passed away. 3 crazy things happened while we were there. One night, my wife and I were hanging in the back screened-in porch, just talking, and we both immediately stopped. We saw through the old glass door a larger shadowy figure walk through the kitchen. It seemed to appear from the kitchen table, middle of the room, and walk 5 feet to the sink before walking out the opposite door from us into the house, very much like my grandpa used to do when he was done eating. He passed away in 2001. No one else was at home at the time. The kids were hanging at the movies, and the grandma, my mom, was there with them. The second thing was a wet, bare footprint on the concrete front porch by the front door. My wife was home alone. She said she heard something at the door, and when she opened it, she saw the footprint. Took a pic of it, sent it to me. Crazy thing is, no one else was there, and it was a dry summer. No water anywhere. The third thing that happened was my wife was in the kitchen cleaning dishes at the sink, and felt someone shove her in the middle of the back. The kids were at school and I was outside working. When she told my mother about that one, she told us that my grandmother had told her something similar had happened to her before, too. Mom thought it might have just been my mother's ghost, or her mother's ghost, because she was an angry person before she died. She didn't like my mom's stepmom, my grandmother. Ask Reddit. When I was in high school, my family rented this house from a family that had owned the property, going all the way back to the 1940s. They didn't want to sell the property because they wanted to keep it in the family. Often after school, when I would arrive home before my older sister, who was heavily involved in extracurriculars, I would always see her bedroom window, which faced the street, and it was wide open. I would get mad at her. I would tell her that she needed to close the window and lock it, which she swore she always did. One day I'm at home, and at the same time as one of the neighbors is out, and he says, "Hello," then goes, "I didn't know your grandma lives with you too. Thought it was just you, your sister, and your mom." And I was like, "What do you mean, my grandma?" And he goes, "The woman who always opens the window after y'all leave for school." Blood just went ice cold. I told him my grandma did not live with us. Same house, different incident. We had a large German shepherd named Fluffy. We kept him in the backyard, and we brought in when we got back from school or got back from work. Once again, I was home early, and I went to the backyard to play with her, and I'm about to open the back door, which has a small window and a small curtain built into it above the handle. To go inside when Fluffy freaks out, just growling and showing her teeth. She goes in front of me and stands against the door and is barking like mad. I look up past Fluffy to see the window on the door. A dark figure was looking out. Totally distorted. I noped out, ran away from the house to my aunt's, who lived about 2.5 blocks away. Our back door led to the kitchen, hence the little curtain and window to peek out into the backyard. Same house. Also had a small tuxedo cat named Maggie. And one day my sister is out at a friend's house, and my mom is working late, and I'm by myself. So I'm just chilling, sitting in the living room. Fluffy is asleep in the kitchen, and my cat is playing in my room, when all of a sudden she darts out of my room all puffy and lands on my lap. I start to smell what smells like a dead animal in the house. I'm gagging and see a figure walk from my room. It happened so fast. Fluffy is growling like crazy and my cat is a puff monster. Luckily, I still had my school bag near me and I put Maggie in my bag with the zipper partially closed. That way she could poke her head out. And I left the back door and I just ran to my aunt's house in the middle of the night. I was just sobbing. Felt bad because if I was strong enough to control Fluffy, I would have taken her too, but fortunately she was a massive dog and was almost larger than me in height when she stood on her back legs. I don't know what I saw, but I thought I was going to die. Last night I was with my partner and our friend, and we were at a place called the Rafe Chasm. It's in Gloucester, Massachusetts. We got there at about 10 p.m. and we were just going to have a fire out by the rocks in the water. We had to walk through some wooded area to get to the rocks, and as we pulled up to the area, I had a bad feeling for some reason. And usually I trust my intuition, but I told myself I was just psyching myself out. Once we got to the spot, I immediately felt a weird feeling, but again I told myself I was just making things up. Even so, I didn't turn my back to the open space, and I was turned facing towards the woods and rock area. As the people I were with watched the fire, I stared out into the darkness, feeling like something was watching us. I decided to go to a rock further away from the fire so my eyes could adjust to the darkness. And lo and behold, I see a translucent white figure about 50 feet away from us on top of the rocks. On the other side of the area, pretty high up, it was moving back and forth, and it looked about 5 or 6 feet tall. It started to scale down the rocks, and when I say scale, I mean fast, like faster than humanly possible. And as it's doing that, it gets smaller and turns into the shape of an animal like a coyote or a wolf. Shapeshifters usually takes forms of things like these. I say out loud, "Is that an animal?" And my partner looks over and immediately gets super sketched out, just as I was. The other person that we were with wasn't bothered for some reason. He said he saw it, but in the moment he was trying to convince us that it was a person, he was drunk. As I see it coming towards us, I get absolutely horrified that it's going to kill us. I tried to go up higher on the rocks to get away from it. I literally thought that was it, thought I was going to die. I had the most horrifying feeling, and it was genuinely the scariest, most terrifying thing I'd ever felt or seen. I pulled out my phone and shined my flashlight on it to make sure I'm not tripping, and I think that I deterred whatever it was away from us, because it ended up running into the woods and disappearing. My partner and I were completely horrified, and my legs were violently shaking. I said that we need to leave immediately. The friend that we were with wanted to stay and finish his drink, but we wanted to go. He told us that he would prove that it was a human by trying to run down the rocks as fast as he could to prove that a human could be going that fast. But when he did, we couldn't hear him running around. And that's the scary part about what we saw. It was completely silent as it went down the rocks and back up them. We weren't able to process what had happened until we had gotten home after we dropped our friend off. When we did, we decided to do some research about ski walkers and the area that we were in. That's the end of today's selection of stories. That was an interesting read. and I was not ready for the Dungeons and Dragons accent there. Hope you guys have a great night. See ya.